The great halls of the intergalactic Concord were filled with silence when the Thalari delegation entered. Tall, silver-skinned, and cloaked in layers of ceremonial armor, they moved like ghosts of an empire that once ruled half the stars. Now, they walked with lowered heads and hollow pride. The war had ended 6 months ago, and the cost had been great for both sides. But the Thalari had lost more than ships and planets. They had lost their legacy. In an act of political surrender, their final gesture was to hand over what they claimed was a symbol of peace, yet no one expected it to be a girl. She was carried forward in a hovering chair, her limbs bound in metal braces, her eyes locked on the ceiling above as if the world around her didn't matter. Her name, the Thalari Chancellor said without emotion, was Princess Kalari, daughter of the last High Commander and the sole surviving heir to the throne. She was born different, he explained quickly, her mind affected by a rare disorder, her body weak, and her future without meaning. In their culture, such an heir was considered a curse, hidden from public sight, spoken of only in whispers. Now, they were offering her to the human alliance like a broken trophy, unwanted, unseen, and untouched by her own people. No one knew what to say. The human officials looked at one another, unsure if this was a joke or an insult. Why would they want a disabled alien princess? What were they supposed to do with her? Some thought it was a trap, others a mockery. A few saw her with pity, but none with purpose. That was when Captain Elias Rowe stepped forward. A former war hero turned humanitarian officer, Elias was not in uniform that day, dressed simply in a dark coat with a scar across his cheek that spoke of battles survived. His eyes, though, were clear, watchful, calm, and deeply tired of war. He looked at Kalari, not with fear or disgust, but with curiosity. She was not moving, barely blinking, but something in her gaze, quiet and sharp, caught his attention. While others saw a burden, he saw a mystery. "I'll take her," he said, breaking the silence like a blade cutting through glass. Heads turned. The Thalari delegation gave no sign of approval, nor relief. They simply bowed once and left, as if shedding their last piece of shame. Elias approached Kalari's chair carefully. He didn't touch her, didn't try to speak to her immediately. He only crouched slightly to meet her gaze. Her eyes didn't follow him, but he sensed that she noticed. Her breathing changed, just slightly. She was more aware than she seemed. He arranged for her transport aboard his ship, the Halcyon Star, a mid-sized exploration cruiser now retired from service and used for medical and relief missions. The crew was small, just 5 others, including a med tech, a language specialist, and a young pilot who'd never seen a Thalari in real life. They weren't happy. Whispers spread fast. Why was a former captain risking everything for an alien who might not even understand them? Some thought he'd gone soft. Others suspected deeper reasons. But Elias didn't explain. He only said, "She's not what they think she is," and left it at that. The journey began with silence. Kalari didn't speak, didn't move unless guided. Medical scans showed an unusual neural pattern, chaotic, unstable, yet strangely active. Her body was fragile, but her brain. There was something more. The language specialist, Marin, tried multiple Thalari dialects, but Kalari never replied. Days passed. The crew grew restless. One night, Elias entered the observation deck where Kalari sat alone, watching the stars pass through the glass dome. Her chair was locked in place, her arms resting on her lap. But her eyes, they weren't empty. They followed the stars. They traced their paths. Elias spoke to her not in Thalari, but in English. He didn't expect a reply. He just talked, telling her about the places they'd visited, the storms they'd flown through, the war that had ended and left everyone tired. And then he said something that surprised even himself. "You don't belong to them anymore. You're free now. Whatever they did to you, it doesn't matter here." For the first time, Kalari blinked slowly and turned her head just slightly, but enough. It wasn't much, but it was a choice. Elias smiled faintly and walked away. That night, the ship's systems recorded strange activity. Kalari had accessed a minor console near her chair without help. No one understood how. She couldn't even stand, yet the system log showed input patterns that matched the Thalari coding, but the codes were efficient beyond normal. Elias had the data reviewed, and his instincts told him what others didn't see. Kalari had been more than just an heir. She'd been trained. Or used. The next morning, Marin reported a partial translation breakthrough. Kalari had muttered something in her sleep, a phrase repeated twice, key within. Locked for peace. No one understood what it meant, but Elias felt a chill. She wasn't just disabled. She was hiding something. Maybe not by choice. Maybe someone had used her mind for more than royal bloodlines. Suddenly, Kalari wasn't just a forgotten princess, she was a puzzle. And someone, somewhere, might want her back. But not for kind reasons. As Elias stood outside her quarters, watching the stars fade into the light of a nearby moon, he realized one truth: taking her wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. And whatever secrets lay inside the mind of the alien princess, they were dangerous enough to change everything. The hum of the Halcyon star echoed softly through the narrow corridors as it drifted between systems, carrying the strange silence that followed wherever Kalari went. She remained seated in her hoverchair most of the time, usually positioned near the viewing deck, her thin arms still bound in the supports designed by her own people. Her body was fragile, slow to respond, but her eyes never stopped moving. They followed the lights, the crew, the screens, and Elias noticed. He had seen too many broken things in the war to mistake Kalari for something useless. She wasn't weak. She was locked, like a door bolted from the inside. Whatever chains held her were not only physical, they were inside her mind, deep, maybe even placed there on purpose. After the strange console activity last week, Elias had assigned Marin, the language specialist, to observe Kalari more closely, and what she discovered was unexpected. Kalari wasn't unresponsive, she simply refused to respond in the way others expected. She had her own rhythm. She flinched when exposed to Thalari words, but sometimes she blinked in patterns when English was spoken, especially near certain phrases. Marin began keeping track of these reactions, and with time, a pattern emerged. It wasn't speech, but it was communication. Elias ordered a soft Neuralink band installed in her chair, harmless and non-invasive, to monitor her brain activity when she heard certain sounds or saw specific images. The data that came back confused the ship's AI. Her brain was lit with unusual bursts of activity, firing in patterns that weren't random but too fast to be natural. Artificial? Maybe. As if something had been implanted long ago, a program, a block, or a second language buried under her natural thoughts. The crew didn't understand, but Elias suspected what it meant. Someone had used her mind as storage, maybe for military data, or worse, a control system. The thought made him uneasy. If Kalari had once been the vessel for a weapon, and that weapon was still buried inside her, what would happen if it woke up? But even as the questions grew, so did his sense of protectiveness. She wasn't just some ticking device. She was a person. And she was starting to trust him, even if only a little. Late one night, while the others slept, Elias found Kalari sitting alone in the engine room. The door hadn't been opened, yet there she was, her chair parked in front of the core terminal, her eyes fixed on the pulsing blue energy inside the reactor glass. "Did someone bring you here?" he asked gently, but she didn't respond. Then the terminal behind her flickered, even though no one had touched it. Lines of old Thalari script scrolled across the display for a second before vanishing. Elias felt a chill. He approached carefully, speaking slowly. "Kalari, are you doing that?" Her fingers twitched, ever so slightly. He didn't ask more. He simply sat down beside her and watched the core with her. The next morning, the ship's logs showed a brief attempt to connect to a hidden frequency used by Thalari warships. It had failed, but just barely. Elias didn't report it. He had the logs encrypted. No one else needed to know, not yet. He began to piece together the truth. Kalari's disability was not natural. Her condition had been force manipulated. She'd been altered to contain something. And worse, they had locked her in her own body to keep it safe. But who had done this? And why give her away so easily to the humans? Unless Elias brought in a friend, Dr. Lena Voss, a cyber neurospecialist with clearance to access retired Thalari archives. She arrived quietly, bringing with her old case files recovered from the war. What she found was disturbing. Kaleri had been registered under a hidden code project labeled Mindweaver Protocol. The records were limited, heavily censored, but it described a program to implant strategic AI fragments into living minds, to create organic weapons capable of surviving even planetary annihilation. Kaleri had been one of the early test subjects chosen because of her royal blood, trusted lineage, and strong genetics. But something had gone wrong. Her mind hadn't broken, it had resisted. Instead of obeying commands, it locked the system away. She became unreadable to her creators. They had called her a failure. But in truth, she had protected herself. Her silence was not weakness. It was survival. Elias felt both horror and admiration. She had been tortured by her own people, then discarded. And still, something inside her had fought back. Now, that something might be the key to unlocking not just her past, but a secret the Thalari never wanted humans to find. The question was, who else knew she was still alive? That answer came faster than expected. On the edge of Sector 9, the Halcyon star was intercepted by a small, unregistered vessel, black hull, no markings. It didn't fire. It only scanned them and vanished. But its tech signature matched known Thalari remnants. Elias knew then they were being watched. Kaleri had been found. That night, she had a seizure. Her chair locked in place, lights blinking red, her body spasming in small, painful jolts. But during the fit, the neuroband recorded something strange, a signal. A digital burst coded, sharp, and directed. Not just a seizure. It had been a transmission. Someone had activated part of the Mindweaver system remotely, perhaps trying to access it or destroy it. Elias cut all long-range comms and rerouted the ship toward the Diros Belt, a dark zone filled with asteroid storms and gravitational noise. It was the only place they could hide while they figured out what to do. Kaleri was stabilized, resting in the medbay, but the signal had done something. When she woke, she looked directly at Elias for the first time, and this time she spoke. Her voice was rough, low, barely above a whisper, but clear. They want inside again. Don't let them. Elias didn't flinch. He nodded once, his voice steady. I won't. And with that, a line had been drawn not just between human and Thalari, but between what she was and what she refused to become. Deep in the belly of the Halcyon star, a mind long chained had taken its first step toward freedom. But freedom always comes with a price. And soon they would learn who was willing to pay it. The Halcyon star drifted silently through the shifting dust fields of the Diros Belt, hiding among dead asteroids and shattered metal from long-forgotten battles, where signals struggled to travel, and light bent strangely through the gravitational pull of ancient celestial wreckage. Elias stood at the helm, scanning the shadows beyond the glass, knowing full well that time was running out. Kaleri had spoken just once since the seizure, warning them of what was coming, but since then she had gone quiet again, not from fear but from focus. Something had awakened inside her, not fully visible yet, but present like a second mind stirring beneath her calm face. Dr. Voss worked day and night to stabilize Kaleri's neural state, while Elias reviewed every piece of information the crew had recovered so far. The coded transmissions, the Mindweaver files, the old Thalari maps had all pointed to one conclusion. Kalari's mind held not just fragments of a command system, but the final access key to an entire forgotten fleet of Thari warships that had been hidden deep in the void during the war. They weren't just keeping her alive anymore, they were protecting the galaxy from a power no one should control. The crew was uneasy, especially young pilot Juno, who had started to believe Kalari wasn't just a passenger, but a danger. One night, the ship's perimeter alarms went off. A stealth vessel had slipped into the belt, scanning with tight beams and no radio call. Elias knew it wasn't pirates. It was them, the Thalari remnant, rogue factions of the Empire that had refused the peace and believed in rebuilding the old rule through force. Somehow, they had tracked Kalari's signal again, and now they wanted to take her not for mercy, but for control. They hailed the Halcyon Star only once. A distorted voice came through, speaking in Thalari, but the meaning was clear: surrender the girl or be destroyed. Elias didn't reply. He turned off the comms and began evasive maneuvers, but the enemy ship was faster, armed, and clearly built for war. Halcyon Star had only basic weapons, barely enough to hold off a fighter, let alone a war-class frigate. The crew rushed to stations, Juno shouting as the ship shook under the first warning shot. Callery, still strapped to her chair, looked up as red lights filled the hallway. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes flicked toward the walls as if she could see the ship's structure through them. Then, without warning, screens across the bridge blinked with strange code. At first, the crew thought it was a virus. But Elias recognized the rhythm. It was her. Callery had linked with the ship's system somehow, her brainwaves syncing with the human interface, and she wasn't attacking. She was defending. The ship's shields redirected power on their own. Emergency thrusters fired at perfect angles. A counter-hack pulse was sent out, temporarily scrambling the targeting system of the enemy ship. The Halcyon Star dodged the next missile by inches. Elias realized then that the Mindweaver system wasn't just a storage device. It had adapted. It was learning from Callery, shaping itself around her thoughts. She wasn't just the key anymore, she was the system. But the remnant ship had numbers. 3 more vessels appeared on long-range scan, approaching fast from different angles. Elias knew they wouldn't survive without a miracle. That's when Callery spoke again, her voice calm and clear in the middle of chaos. "There's a fleet," she said, hidden past the drift arc. "My mind has the command. If I reach the beacon, I can wake them. And shut them down for good." Elias stared at her. "You mean destroy them?" She nodded once. "If they fall into the wrong hands, the war starts again. I can end it." The decision was made instantly. Elias rerouted the ship toward the drift arc, a gravitational trench filled with magnetic storms where no ship dared fly. The remnant followed, pushing through the belt, firing at long range. The Halcyon Star burned through its backup fuel reserves, dodging debris, flying blind through clouds of static. Callery sat in the command center now, her chair locked to a console, cables running from her neural band into the system. Dr. Voss monitored her vitals as they dipped and rose with every spike of data transfer. The further they went, the clearer the path became to her. She began naming coordinates before the nav systems could confirm them. She whispered in Thalari as she unlocked old military firewalls buried in her own mind. The warships, once thought destroyed, lay dormant beyond a shattered moon, massive, silent behemoths in orbit, covered in asteroid camouflage, waiting for a command that never came. Now, Callery was that command. The remnant ships caught up just as the Halcyon Star reached the graveyard. Weapons locked, engines flared, and for a moment the stars stood still. Then Callery closed her eyes. A pulse went out bright, invisible to the human eye, but powerful enough to shake the dormant fleet. Systems came alive. Lights flickered. Cannons rotated. Engines glowed faintly. The remnant ships panicked, breaking formation as they tried to send override codes. But Callery was already ahead. She overrode their codes. One by one, the dormant ships powered up not to attack, but to turn their weapons inward. She had programmed them to self-destruct if ever activated by force. And now they did. In the blackness of the void, silent fire bloomed like a dying star. One ship exploded, then another. The shockwaves pushed debris in every direction. The remnant tried to retreat, but Callery hijacked their engines for 10 seconds, just long enough for the third explosion to catch them. Only one enemy ship escaped, its signal broken, its hull damaged, fleeing back into the dark. The Halcyon Star drifted quietly, its crew stunned. Callery slumped forward, blood trailing from her nose, her mind overloaded from the interface. Dr. Voss cut the connection and stabilized her as best as she could. Elias sat beside her, not saying anything, just holding her hand until her breathing slowed. She had saved them all and destroyed what could have become the next war. But something had changed. Kaleri wasn't just unlocking her mind anymore. She was becoming something new. Her voice returned the next day, quiet but steady. "It's not over," she said. "There's more hidden. Something worse." Elias knew then that the enemy hadn't just wanted the fleet. They had feared what Kaleri might become. And now, even he was starting to wonder what would happen when she unlocked everything. The stars outside the Halcyon star looked colder now, as if they too had watched what Kaleri had done and didn't quite know what to make of her anymore. And while the ship moved in silence toward the Diros system, no one spoke of the explosions or the fleet that once slept in the void, now reduced to drifting ruins and scattered fire. Kaleri had not left her chair since the fleet's destruction, her body still recovering from the massive neural strain. But her eyes had changed where once there had been confusion or fear. Now there was clarity, a calm awareness that frightened even the most seasoned crew members. Elias stood at her side often, watching for signs of distress, but she remained still, processing something far bigger than any of them understood. Dr. Voss confirmed what Elias had already guessed every time Kaleri connected to a system. Something inside her grew stronger, not just mentally, but technologically. She was evolving, or rather, the Mindweaver system was adapting, reshaping itself around her unique mind, unlocking forgotten protocols and lost knowledge that hadn't been touched in years. But with that power came danger, and now it was clear they were running out of time. The enemy ship that had escaped hadn't just retreated, it had warned the others. Diros V, a mining colony long thought abandoned after the war, was no longer empty. Scans showed movement turrets, energy shields, active heat signatures. It had been turned into a base, likely the remnants' last stronghold in this region, and all signs pointed to one terrible truth: they were preparing to awaken a second fleet hidden beneath the planet's surface. Unlike the graveyard Kaleri had destroyed, this fleet hadn't been built for defense. It was designed for invasion. Elias knew what it meant. If those warships launched, it would be the beginning of a new galactic war, and this time, Earth wouldn't be safe. The crew was divided. Some wanted to run, report what they had found, and leave the fight to the military. But Elias knew command wouldn't believe them without proof, and even if they did, help would come too late. They had Kaleri, and only she could unlock or destroy what was buried beneath Diros V. This was their battle. Their last stand. The plan was simple and impossible at the same time. Fly into the upper atmosphere, drop Kaleri and a small team near the old comm spire, and activate the deep seal codes buried in her mind to access the mainframe hidden beneath the old mining facility. Once inside, Kaleri would try to shut the fleet down permanently. But there was a risk if her mind failed during the process, or if the remnant caught them first, she could be captured, and then the very power she had used to protect the galaxy would fall into the wrong hands. The descent to Diros V was rough. Ion storms battered the hull, static filled the screens, and anti-air turrets fired blind into the clouds. Juno dodged expertly, swerving between burning rock formations and smoke trails, while Elias led Kaleri and 3 others through the drop hatch. The surface was worse than expected: ash everywhere, toxic winds, and the remains of broken mining bots crawling half-buried through the dust. The team moved fast, with Kaleri strapped to a mobile interface chair, her eyes glowing faintly as she connected with the old comm tower ahead. They reached it just in time. A sudden pulse knocked out local drones, and Kaleri whispered, "They know we're here." Within minutes, remnant foot soldiers arrived, armored, silent, and heavily armed. The battle was brutal. 2 crew members fell before Elias and Marin managed to rig an explosive trap that bought them a few precious minutes. Kaleri, untouched in the chaos, had already begun her work. Her fingers, once stiff and useless, now twitched rapidly across the interface. The comm tower responded like it had been waiting for her all this time. Deep underground, ancient doors unlocked, and the sleeping mainframe of the Second Fleet stirred. Kaleri's voice echoed through the static. "I found it," she said, "but it's different. Something else is here." At first, Elias didn't understand, but then the ground shook. Not from weapon fire, but from something rising. A massive shape erupted from the dust miles away, a carrier-class ship larger than any vessel built during the war. It wasn't just a warship. It was a command node, an artificial intelligence ship designed to lead the fleet without pilots, connected to every other vessel like a hive mind. And worse, it had already activated. Kellari screamed not from pain, but from pressure. The command ship was calling to her. It recognized her as one of its own, reaching into her mind, trying to rewrite her, make her part of its system. Dr. Voss's theory had been right. The Mindweaver was not just for storage. It was meant for control. But Kellari fought back. Through her tears and shaking breath, she began shutting down sectors one by one. Her voice came in fragments. Command link error. Override. Human signal injected. She was using her humanity to fight a machine that thought she belonged to it. Elias could only watch, helpless, as the sky above them lit with ships rising from the earth like ghosts. Dozens. Hundreds. But then, one by one, they started falling. The carrier ship flickered, losing control. Kellari was winning. But the enemy commander had prepared for this. He arrived personally, landing his own craft just outside the tower. Elias faced him head-on, buying Kellari the time she needed, even as blaster fire burned around him. He didn't expect to survive, but just as the commander raised his weapon, a pulse erupted from the tower so strong it melted his visor mid-air. Kellari had finished it. She had linked to the hive completely for just 10 seconds, and in that moment, had rewritten the core directive, sleep forever. The entire fleet, every ship in the sky, shut down mid-flight, falling gently like ash back to the surface. The war had ended before it could begin. Kellari collapsed, her mind nearly broken, but alive. Elias caught her before she hit the ground. The last sound they heard before silence took over was the command ship's final shutdown, one long, echoing hum that faded into nothingness. The Halcyon star picked them up hours later, as the dust cleared and the skies returned to peace. No more enemy signals. No more danger. But something had changed in Kellari. She wasn't just free of her chains. She had become something new, part human, part code, but fully in control. And though the threat was over for now, Elias knew deep down, the galaxy had just seen the beginning of what she could become. Somewhere out there, others were watching, waiting. Because when someone like Kellari exists, peace is never left alone for long. Weeks passed after the fall of Diros V, but the galaxy hadn't yet decided whether to feel relieved or afraid, for word had spread fast, not about Elias or the Halcyon star, but about her, the alien girl once thought broken and useless, who had not only stopped a war before it began, but had also done it by taking control of the most dangerous technology the Thalari Empire had ever created. And though the stars were silent for now, leaders, militaries, and secret networks were all whispering the same question. What exactly was Princess Kellari now? Back on Earth, the humans had mixed feelings. Some praised her, calling her a savior, proof that humanity's belief in compassion could shape a new kind of future. Others were nervous, wondering if trusting an alien with such power, no matter how gentle she seemed, was a terrible mistake waiting to unfold. Elias ignored all of it. He stayed by her side during her recovery, watching her struggle to piece her mind back together after connecting so deeply with the command ship. At first, she could barely speak. Her hands trembled. Sometimes, she flinched at voices only she could hear ghost code. She called it leftover fragments from the hive that still whispered in the quiet. But she refused to let it break her. Day by day, she trained. Not like a warrior, but like someone shaping their mind into something stronger. Dr. Voss helped reprogram the Mindweaver system to act more like a shield than a weapon, filtering the outside noise, protecting Kellari's thoughts from being taken again. But as her mind healed, something strange began to happen. Systems around her started responding without being touched. Lights dimmed when she focused. Doors opened before she reached them. Even the ship's AI began speaking more softly, as if it knew who stood in its presence. Kellari was changing not in body, but in essence. She had become a living link between human technology and alien code, and wherever she went, Machines listened. Elias began to understand what the remnant had feared, not just her power, but what she symbolized, a new kind of royalty, not born of bloodlines or tradition, but of adaptation and choice. She wasn't a ruler because someone had given her a throne, she was becoming one because the systems themselves recognized her. As news spread of the dormant fleets she had shut down, small colonies and outposts began reaching out not to Earth's governments, but to her, sending coded messages asking for help, guidance, or even protection. Kellery didn't answer most of them, not yet. She knew trust was fragile. But one message caught her attention. It came from a former Thalari world now. Abandoned, where survivors were trying to rebuild without war, haunted by the fear that someone would return to finish what the Empire started. They weren't asking for weapons. They were asking for someone to keep them safe. Elias saw the look in her eyes when she read it, soft but certain. "We go there," she said. And they did. The Halcyon Star landed on a quiet ridge above the settlement, where broken buildings still bore scars of the old war. Kalari didn't arrive with guards or fanfare. She walked through the dust with Elias at her side and her head uncovered, a simple device on her wrist to monitor her neural waves and eyes that scanned everything without judgment. The people there didn't know what to expect. But when she spoke, they listened. She didn't offer them control. She offered them connection, a shared network, protected by her signal, where no weapon could be activated without mutual consent. A living system of balance, shaped by peace and memory. The people agreed, and it worked. That settlement was the first to rise, clean and bright within months. Then others followed. Slowly, the galaxy began to shift. Not through battle, but through choice. Small systems linked together through Kalari's guidance, forming what the news called the Crownless Alliance, a network of worlds not loyal to flags or empires, but to a common code of trust, balance, and shared defense. She didn't rule them. She held them together. And soon, the galaxy stopped asking who she was. It started asking what comes next. But peace never lasts forever. One night, as Elias reviewed maps in the Halcyon Star's control room, Kalari entered, her face pale, eyes distant. "Something is coming," she said, and for the first time since Diros V, her voice held fear. A pulse, deeper than code, older than the Thalari. It's waking up. At first, Elias thought it was just another buried fleet, maybe a last defense node. But Kalari shook her head. No. It's not theirs. And it's not sleeping. It's watching. She showed him a signal, barely a whisper through the static of space. A pattern not built by humans or Thalari, but something different. Ancient. It had activated after Kalari's last command, responding not with violence, but with curiosity. Something had heard her voice through the Mindweaver link, and now it wanted to know who she was. Elias realized then that the galaxy was far wider than either of them had known, and Kalari's transformation had reached beyond what any of them understood. She had become more than a bridge between species. She had become a beacon, and whatever was watching her now wasn't human, wasn't Thalari. It was something else. Maybe friend, maybe enemy, but certainly powerful. Kalari didn't seem afraid, just thoughtful. "I think it's looking for something, like I was." Elias looked at her, the girl who was once a prisoner, now standing calm in the face of a new unknown. "And if it finds you?" he asked. She turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. "Then I'll show it what we've built. And if it wants to destroy it, it'll have to go through me first." Outside the window, stars moved quietly, blinking like distant eyes. And as the Halcyon Star prepared for its next jump, the crew didn't see a fragile girl anymore. They saw their leader, their protector, their royalty, not because she ruled them, but because she stood with them. A new kind of queen, crowned not by power or fear, but by the strength of a mind that chose peace when others demanded war. Kalari, the unwanted heir, had become something the galaxy had never seen before. And her story was only just beginning.